Hi, I'm Mike Morse. Welcome to another episode of Open Mic. Today, of course, we have Kevin Dietz, as always, and we are very happy to welcome Michael Forsyth, the owner of Detroit City Distillery.
Joining us this morning is Mike Morse, Detroit's top 30. Mike Morse is in here to tell us about the backpack giveaway.
We adapt and change things up a little bit every year. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us. Happy to be here.
So I have had your alcohol before. I think it's great. I don't remember which ones I've had.
Sure.
And so, I mean, before we get into the booze, are you a Detroit native?
I'm not a Detroit native. I've been here for about 10 years now.
Okay. Where'd you come from?
So all the owners of the distillery, we actually all grew up together in a little tiny town called Bath, Michigan. So it's just north of Lansing. I've known all the guys since about 3 years old.
Wow.
So
where you said just north of Lansing?
Yeah, just north of Lansing.
Okay.
Bath,
By
Michigan.
St. Joe, is St. Joe up there?
St. John's.
St.
is
John's
right there.
is right
Yep.
there.
So we're right between Lansing and St. John's, and good old country boys. You know, the business started when the guy who bought us beer left town, and we started making our own.
So you
Left our
started
own
making it
devices.
up in Bath?
Yeah.
And then you brought it to Detroit?
Yeah, but I mean, we were like
12.
16. Yes.
So what made you do this?
So yeah, I mean, you know, I think there's a couple things. So, you know, like I said, we all grew up together. You know, we all grew up in the country. We started, you know, making kind of our own, jailhouse hooch when we were 16, and it inspired this kind of pipe dream to open a brewery, right? And so the smart one out of the bunch, JP, he was like, I'm going to go to school and learn how to make beer. And so he went to Bell. He worked at Bell's Brewery for a number of years. He's got a PhD in microbiology, and it happened at a bachelor party, actually. We decided, you know, this brewery thing's been done. Let's open a distillery. And, you know, we had a lot of drinks that weekend. And it sounded like a good idea. And the distillery happened, but the wedding never did. And here we are.
So this is about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And where is your shop in Detroit?
Yes, we're in Eastern Market.
And which part?
So we actually have two properties over there. So we have a tasting room, which is like right in the heart of the market. Right by Vivio's, by all the sheds down there, if you're familiar with the area. And then we have a big factory where we kind of mass produce this stuff. It's in the old Stroh's ice cream factory, which before that was Goebel's Brewery.
Sure.
So it's the last remaining historic structure left from the epicenter alcohol production.
So
in
is
Detroit.
the warehouse where you make the distillery, is that open to the public or is that private tours?
We just do tours and private events.
Okay. And what kind of booze are you making?
Yeah, so we are mostly known for making our whiskeys. We have some bourbon I brought over. We make a really good rye. We make some experimental stuff. We do a lot of gins. We do a lot of collaborations also with like bartenders and chefs around town, Lady of the House, Grey Ghost, Foundation Hotel, to name a couple. And then we make vodka as well. And this time of year, we do a special vodka where we distill a boatload of punchki to make a Punchki Day vodka.
So is this the first year you're doing Punchki vodka?
So it's our third year.
Third year.
The first 2 years were very small. You know, it was basically just for us and friends and family. So our distiller, Steve Ojachowski, he's our distiller of Polish descent.
You want to try to
Common spelling.
You want to try to
Common
spell?
spelling,
How do you
yeah.
spell that, Kevin? I'm just kidding. I have it right in front of me.
You know, I
spell it,
hope
you
I
get a
get it
drink.
close enough to write. But yeah, so Steve, you know, there's a lot of flavored vodka in the world. So, you know, Steve one day was like, I wonder if I could distill punchki. And so we did, and it turned out really good. So then we made a little bit more the next year, and then it was such a big hit that we decided we were going to scale it up and, you know, put it in distribution so bars and restaurants and liquor stores can own it, and it's
Churches.
been wild.
So it's not out yet.
It's not out yet. There's a few select liquor stores and bars and restaurants who've probably gotten their orders by now, but you know, we're trying to get it out for this weekend. Fat Tuesday or Punchki Day in this part of the world is next Tuesday, the 25th.
Right.
So we release it at our spot on Saturday.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, you showed me some pictures before we started recording here. You're literally putting broken up punchkis and whole punchkis into the distiller, into the still?
Yes. Yes.
Am I saying that right?
You're saying that exactly
I've never
right.
stilled anything. But so how does that work? I mean, I saw the pictures. It's fascinating. I've never seen donuts basically in
a big
alcohol.
huge.
It
vat
sounds
of
yummy.
vodka.
I can't wait to try it. But go ahead.
Yeah, so
Usually you have the vodka first, then eat the donuts at the end of the night.
Yes.
right. So this year we did something special. So we sourced 100% potato vodka from Poland, straight from the motherland.
Like the Belvedere.
Yeah. So
That's potato vodka, right? Is it Belvedere?
If it's vodka, it's potato vodka.
No, it's not.
No,
always.
there's
It's not
different
all
kinds.
potato. But anyway, I'm
Well,
sorry.
yeah, I
I
mean-
digress. So you bought potato vodka from Poland.
Yeah. And
Lots
then-
of it.
Lots of it. And then we got 12 dozen raspberry punchki. You got to go with the glazed.
Did you buy those local? I mean,
Yeah, so we bought them from New Palace Bakery,
fat,
which
yeah.
is like
The
the,
place.
legendary
The line
bakery
around
in
the block
Hamtramck.
bakery.
Yes, so that's Steve's favorite punchki, and it's kind of local legend in Hamtramck. And so so we got 12 dozen, 144 punchki, broke them in half, threw them in the still, and then they soak. They just float in this vodka overnight, and it turns this like beautiful red rosé, and then you fire it up. And basically what happens when you distill something, it boils, and the alcohol vapor comes off first. So the alcohol vapor is extracting the essence of the punchki, and then you convert that gas essentially back down to liquid. And so you're left with alcohol that tastes like punchki.
And how many does 12 dozen make? How many bottles does it make?
Yeah, so our first batch, ironically, yielded exactly 666 bottles.
That's weird.
So the devil made us do it the first time. The next two times we did it on our own, so we're on batch 3 right now because it's been going so crazy.
So you're going to have under 2,000 bottles.
Yep. So
Is
probably
that
just
is that it?
that's
the
it.
year?
We can't
Like if-
get any more vodka from Poland. We're
No?
like producing it around the clock right now.
Interesting.
And so it's sold out in distribution. So if you're a bar, or restaurant, or liquor store listening to this, you'll have to come to us to get it. So we sent over about 60 cases on Monday, and it sold out in 20 minutes.
Sent 60 cases to who?
To Great Lakes Wine and Spirits is our
Oh, and their
distributor.
distributor.
Yeah.
Ross has a question.
No, I just say, I was thinking of it, it's limited edition, but actually all that is, it's small batch. It's truly small batch, right?
It's small batch. Punchki Day only happens once a year. And so, this is a time where Punchki Mania is at its peak. And so this is the only time of the year we do it.
So if our listeners want a bottle,
Yes.
they can go where?
So my best recommendation is to come to us. So the release party starts Saturday at 10 a.m. in
Okay.
Eastern Market at our tasting room. We're open until midnight. We got some great treats, local pierogi makers slinging pierogi and some punchki.
That's this Saturday night,
That's this Saturday.
February 22nd. So we're going to have to get the podcast out by 20.
Boom.
Hey, Rocky,
You're working.
you're working
late
overtime.
tonight.
I'll get you some bourbon.
Yeah.
If so, I apologize in advance if the show is a little wonky. Our director may be a little drunk. I have a question. Who got to eat the punchki mush after you were done distilling? Is that not edible at that point?
Or does it?
So nobody did,
Melt.
but it probably
It was good. You could
it
have
was probably really good and
probably
really alcoholic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ross would have liked that.
Yeah.
Turn it into gummies.
Yeah.
Ross would have come over for breakfast.
Hey, next year.
Next time.
Next year for sure.
I'm really excited to try it. So it's a raspberry flavored vodka, raspberry and sugar. How sweet would you say it is?
So it's really not overly sweet. So the potato vodka is super clean, like really crisp canvas to distill on. And so you get a nice raspberry flavor. I think that's what comes through most. But, some people get it on the nose. Some people get it, on the finish. You get this nice little like doughy, sugary finish to it. It's not overly sweet though. So
And there's no fat. It's a fat-free
it may
drink.
actually be a healthier way to consume.
Yeah, that's what I'm
punchki.
thinking. You could
And
lose
you
weight.
get-
Yeah, because the punchki has about
2,000 calories a piece.
Right.
And this also has alcohol in it.
Right.
So, I mean,
Like-
win-win.
It's a win-win. Ross, what do you think? What do you do?
So this
what are you
this
doing
one
over there?
this
What are
one
you
worked
texting?
like the
I'm making my notes to be at the city distillery at 10 a.m.
Sometimes
On
you'll
my
go to
calendar.
the bar and there'll be a big jar with vodka and pineapples or different things, and they'll just sit there for a couple of weeks, and then they'll take the flavored vodka out of there. You wouldn't
that's
do
not
that
distilling.
with you wouldn't
No.
do that with punch keys. Just throw a bunch of punch keys.
No, so that's
That's a good question, though. Why couldn't they do that? Make
I
a
don't
big
know.
jar,
You see 'em at,
put punchkis on the bottom,
Capitol Grill.
like they do at Capitol Grill
Yeah.
with the pineapple,
So-
that's Stoli Doli, I think
Right,
they call
there
it.
you go.
Not that
That's
I've
what I
ever
was
had
looking
100 of
You seem to
them.
have more information on that than me.
Right, yeah.
That's what I was going for. Yeah.
Well, you know, so,
$12.95, but they're specials on Tuesday. I'm just kidding.
those sorts of infusions are common, right? And so, not everybody owns a distillery, so not everybody has the luxury of distilling 144 punchkis at once. So, but for us, when you soak something in vodka, right, like pineapple or whatever, you're going to get a bunch of that juice. It's going to stay in the vodka. This, you're actually extracting the alcohol via vapor. So it's gas, and then it converts back down to liquid. So you're getting something that's like super nice and clean that just tastes like what was in it, but there's no real there's no
Is there
rem in
sugar in it?
We're going to have to taste test that now.
Yeah,
We're going to have to get a stuff a
10 a.m.
punchki in it.
You, me, and Ross. But no, I'm really curious.
Yeah.
Like, are you going to have to put alcohol doesn't have how much sugar is in it? Is there going to be sugar in it?
Well, yeah, there's always a little bit of sugar in it, right?
Just a
I mean,
little,
there's
though.
some calories and all that, but the goal is for the yeast when you're distilling something and creating alcohol, you add yeast, which breaks down sugar, which creates alcohol. You essentially, we're looking at a bottle of bourbon here right now. You're essentially making almost a beer, and then which is 8 to 12% alcohol, and then the process of distillation is you take a large quantity of something and you reduce it to a smaller, more concentrated quantity of itself. So you're distilling that alcohol down into a more concentrated quantity, and so that's basically what you're getting. The goal is for the yeast to break down all the sugar to kind of maximize alcohol output, and so you lose most of the sugar in that process.
So I actually was at a party in the last 2 months somewhere in Detroit. Cool old warehouse. I think it was an old distillery, actually. I don't remember the name of it. And they were serving your alcohol, and they had taste testing, and it was a Saturday night party.
You're probably at the whiskey factory. So
Yeah.
we have big parties
It was
at the whiskey factory.
I didn't remember the exact
It
name.
was upstairs, and you were surrounded by whiskey
Well, when
barrels.
you first walk, yes, and I like that part, actually.
Yeah,
But you
yeah.
walk in
You're at
actually
the
on the main
whiskey
floor.
factory.
At the main floor, they had a
all
barrel.
coming back to 'em.
And they had rye, bourbon,
Yeah.
and whiskey, I believe.
Yeah, so a wedding or
the
something
bar
like
mitzvah.
that. Oh,
I'm a
you
Jew.
went to the bar mitzvah.
Finlings,
Okay,
the Finlings
nice.
bar mitzvah.
Nice, that's great.
And
that was quite the party.
I had to leave a little early, I think, that night, because what they were doing was, at this party, they were serving, usually at these parties, there's a lot of food, right? They're pass a lot of appetizers. But I've never seen this. On the food appetizer tray, they had shots next to it. So it was a shot and
And
a
an
chicken
extra.
skewer, a shot and a hot dog, a shot. And before you get upstairs, you're snockered, okay? And am I right? Am I lying? Were you at that party? Did you come by?
I was, but obviously in the background. I don't like to crash my own parties.
But let me tell you something.
yeah.
I loved the setup that you could try, and these are little
Is
shots.
that the
I'm
tasting
not-
room? Or no?
So no, the tasting room and the whiskey factory are two separate places,
It was the
and
whiskey
they're
factory.
The whiskey factory, is that where it's made? The
Yeah.
old Goebbels place?
exactly.
Okay.
So we tried to name them very explicitly as to what they are, right? So the whiskey factory is where we are manufacturing whiskey. It also happens that we had to open a party space. That's a
Right.
great
I'm
thing
telling
about
you,
owning
great-
a distillery. You kind of get in the party business whether you like it or not.
Right.
It was a great venue.
Yeah.
And what I loved, and let's I already showed a picture of this beautiful bourbon bottle. First of all, can you tell me who's on the bourbon?
Yeah, so this is actually a really good story. So that's Yogi Jerome.
Okay, who's that?
So Yogi Jerome
Come on, get in the game.
is
You don't know
the-
Yogi Jerome?
you tell me who he is, Ross. You the
guy on the bottle.
Smart ass. All right.
So Yogi is the grandfather of our master distiller JP.
Okay.
So the reason why it's called Butcher's Cup Bourbon is because Yogi was a butcher in Eastern Market. So that's like our tie to the place. And then Yogi, in Eastern Market back in the 20s, like it was the epicenter of prohibition. So all the booze was coming across the river from Canada. It was going up the railroad tracks, which is the DeQuinder Cut now, and going into the back all these slaughterhouses and butcher shops. So Yogi was a butcher. Most of the butchers back then were also, assisting
I think the statute of
fellow
limitations. Hold on.
entrepreneurs.
I'm a lawyer.
Yes, I
I'm
know.
pretty
I'm
sure
trying to
the
be
statute
careful.
of limitations for the
passed.
prohibition violators
Yeah.
has ended.
Yogi better make a run
So
for it.
don't worry about it.
So
He's selling booze, moonshine, or whatever
yeah,
they called it back
yeah.
then.
Yeah, he used to build like cement vaults under like chicken coops downriver and stuff to stash booze in, and he traded his gun to a gangster for a motorcycle, and yeah, it's just
Good stories.
You know, like Eastern Market is full of amazing stories. Like the place has so much history in terms of alcohol and then food. You know, obviously we kind of fit in that space as someone who makes alcohol from
I'm gonna let you do the
grain.
honors.
Sure, my pleasure.
So, thank you, Rocky. Will you give this to Ross? Take your time. Or thanks, Kevin. Rocky, you want to try some? You gotta get yourself a glass. Sorry, man. I only have no. So, okay. So this is bourbon.
Yes.
So I've been to several wine tastings in my life.
Yeah.
I've tasted lots of alcohol. Not lots. Let's not get crazy. But one thing I want to do is go down to Kentucky and do the Bourbon
Oh,
Trail.
yeah.
Whiskey,
You
what is it?
absolutely should.
Bourbon Trail, Whiskey Trail.
Bourbon Trail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I've never actually had a real bourbon tasting.
Sure.
So as long as we're here and talking and you're an expert, tell me what I'm looking for with regards to color, smell,
Sure.
taste. Just take us through it and then let's taste it.
Let's start at the very beginning. So it all starts with grain. So, you know, for us, we're all about Michigan. We're sourcing grain. It's all coming through a little place called Dexter Mill. So they take a raw, like corn kernel or rye in this instance, and they melt into a flour. So your recipe is called a mash bill, and that's the different proportions of grain that you put in. So bourbon by law has got to be at least 51% corn or more. Okay, so it's predominantly corn, and then from there, it has to be aged in a freshly charred white American oak barrel. Okay, it's got to be made in America.
America. Hold on.
America.
Isn't there what is it that you have to be? Isn't there something that if it has to be in Kentucky?
So Kentucky bourbon has to be made in Kentucky.
Okay,
But
so that I knew, but it does. But bourbon can be made anywhere.
Bourbon can be made anywhere in America. You know, back like 15, 20 years ago, you know, all the bourbon was getting made in Kentucky because there was just a handful of distilleries. And, you know, during the 80s and 90s, nobody drank bourbon. So, you know, all these Kentucky bourbon distilleries kind of got together and they did something pretty brilliant, you know, from a marketing standpoint is they said bourbon can only come from Kentucky and it's only good if it's really old because they were sitting on a bunch of old stock. And so, you know, now as a new distillery, you know, here in Detroit, you know, we're trying to educate people on what bourbon is and, you know, what makes it good. And so, you know, we make everything from scratch. Okay, if you're a craft distiller, you're in one of two camps. You're either making it from scratch, or if you're like probably 80 to 85%, you're just buying mass-produced bourbon and you're putting it in a bottle. There's actually some interesting case law around some nonsense around that with Templeton, which is a craft distiller, right? So
I've seen
you know
those.
they
Yeah,
were
I've had Templeton.
you know all pre-prohibition homemade, you know, recipe. That was all just sourced from MGP in Indiana.
Just the label was.
Yeah. So, you know, it's about the grain that goes into it. So for us, you know, being a Detroit-based company, having grown up, you know, in a farming community, for us, it's all about kind of celebrating Michigan agriculture. And so, you know, the younger the whiskey is, the more you get to taste some of the nuance of the grain. The longer it sits in the barrel, the more it tastes like the barrel. So that's one really
That's
important
interesting.
thing to know when you're drinking young whiskey is you really want to pay attention to the grain and the tasting notes. You get most of the color and most of the flavor out of the barrel in the first 18 to 24 months.
Okay.
So
And this is 1-year-old bourbon.
it actually just turned 2.
Okay.
We're getting through some old labels.
Okay.
So
it says batch number 27, bottle number 69.
Yeah.
And the grain came from Dexter, Michigan.
Yep.
And the water came from
Water comes from Detroit.
Detroit.
Detroit has
Water.
great water.
Yes,
we
they
have reverse osmosis, so we clean it up, and
Okay.
it's actually a quite excellent source of water.
And where does the flavors come? So it's good grains. It's good water.
Yeah.
What else is in there?
Yeah, and so then it's the
Punchkis.
no punchki in this.
No punchkis in
So this bourbon, 68% corn, 27% rye, and then the balance is a blend of 3 different barleys. There's a raw barley and then 2 roasted specialty malted barleys, which is like secret sauce of craft beer.
All organic grains.
Almost all organic, not 100%.
Okay.
So this would be considered a high rye bourbon. So when you drink this is going to be a little bit on the spicier and drier side of things because rye is an inherently spicy and dry grain.
All right, so I'm thirsty.
I know.
So thank you
Me
for
too.
coming
You're
today,
welcome.
and thank
To
you
the
for
boys
the
from
bourbon.
Bath.
From the boys from Bath.
Cheers.
Let's try it.
Oh, yeah.
Smooth.
It's very
That's
smooth.
that's the first thing that I get. Now I didn't smell it. You don't smell bourbon like you do
Oh,
wine.
you absolutely can. I mean, so there's a lot of different ways to taste this. Our brand ambassador, Garrett, has this whole clap trick, which might get a little bit messy here on the podcast. But, when you smell it, you're picking up, obviously the alcohol hits you. I mean, it's 100 proof bourbon.
Yeah, it's strong
But,
in the nose. It's strong.
you're picking up like caramel and vanilla notes. You're getting a little bit of that, kind of smoke from the oak. This has a nice kind of spice rye finish, but my favorite review I've ever got on this bourbon. So this won Best Young Bourbon in America at the American Distilling Institute Craft Spirits Competition in Louisville, and the judge who named it best in category said, "Tastes like a man I'd like to meet. Leather, cigars, old books, well beyond his age." That was the review
That's
of this
awesome.
bourbon.
That's very poetic.
Yes.
It's going
So-
on the label next year.
What do you what do you taste, Ross? Take a sip. But let's just talk about the vanillas, the spices, the
Let
tobaccos.
me ask you a question, if I may.
absolutely.
You were talking about gas board. Is that where the term "I got gassed"? They say if you're drunk, I'm gassed. Does that come from what you were talking about, like the gas that is released from the thing when they distill?
I have no idea. It's a great question.
I got another question you're
Yeah.
not going to have the answer
Okay.
to. No, I'm kidding.
Fire away.
No, I was curious. I mean, when you said that, I wonder if that's where that expression, he was gassed, came from.
There's so many like interesting little quirks in history and stuff. So like, everybody's like into that show Moonshiners, right? And everybody hears I might go blind if I drink moonshine. Well, the process of distilling, there's 3 distinct processes. There's kind of cuts of the run. So there's the heads, the hearts, and the tails. So the name of the game is ethanol, alcohol, right? But the first part of the run, the heads, is mostly methanol. So if you drink too much of it, like, you could go blind or it could kill you, right? So like, you really kind of have to know what you're doing. So like, if you're in the backwoods, in Kentucky somewhere, way back when, before this has like been a practice, that's been finalized really in the beginning, that's like how distillers went blind, because they weren't cutting out the heads to get to the hearts.
They weren't making it right.
So
Interesting.
So, Kevin, what do you think of this?
I think it's going to cure my cold.
Don't
Yes.
share a glass.
No, I hit that spice does
Yeah.
hit me.
Yeah.
It has a distinct taste to it.
yeah, it's got some sweetness to it. There's some really beautiful like nuttiness, like hazelnut, almond that kind of comes through. Some of those barley malts really kind of bring that out. So yeah, I mean, bourbon is by far our best seller. It's really kind of what we've built our name on. It's really what's fueling a lot of our growth. I mean, we've been the fastest growing distillery in the state the past 3 years.
Is Michigan a good place to make bourbon then? I mean,
So-
the natural ingredients that
Michigan is a phenomenal place to make whiskey. So it's the second most diverse agricultural state in the nation, and you're surrounded by a vast percentage of the world's fresh water. So making whiskey in Michigan should happen for decades to come. Now, is it the best place to sell alcohol? No. It's a control state, right? So everything goes through the government. The taxes are very high. And so, there's been some recent legislations that's kind of passed to make Michigan a more favorable place to make alcohol. Michigan State led a lot of that work about a decade ago. That's why you see so many folks popping up. Valentine's been doing it for a very long time. Two James in our neighborhood has been doing it. You got a bunch of places on the west side of the state, Long Road, Ironfish, Eastern Kill. So, Michigan, obviously, the craft beer industry is booming. This is a very natural extension. So
are you selling this out of state?
We are actually. So
Okay.
we're selling this. We just started distributing down in Chicago last year. And, I was like, well, what's going to happen in Chicago? Like, get this Detroit stuff out of here. People love it. It's classic Midwest. It's made from scratch. We are who we are. We're not trying to be anybody else. There's like no fancy gimmicks. All local grain. So I think, the craftsmanship of it has really kind of sold it well. And people resonate with the Detroit story too, right? Everybody likes a good comeback story.
Yep. How much does a bottle like this cost?
So a bottle
Retail.
like that is $50 at your local liquor store.
And same price down at your facility?
We actually sell it for more at our distillery. Our liquor store partners really love that we do that. So it's $55 at our shop. You get some special packaging when you come down to get it from us.
And how much is the vodka that you're selling this weekend?
So the Punchki vodka is $30. So
Vodka's a little cheaper.
It's cheaper, it's faster. I mean, the challenge from a business standpoint, right? You're an entrepreneur that's figured out how to scale. Just imagine if all the money you made went and sat in a barrel for 2 years before you could make any more money on
I understand. My cases take 2 years to go through the hopper.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
the
that's
same
probably
business.
true.
You're the same business.
I'm a distillery here. Let me ask you a question, Michael, while I have you. If you had to pretend like I was a fifth grader, the difference between bourbon, rye, and whiskey.
Sure.
Because I know whiskey is the umbrella. Bourbon,
Yeah.
rye are whiskeys.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But how would you describe the difference between a bourbon and a rye and something that they just call whiskey, like a
Sour mash.
Bushmills?
Yeah.
Give me a quick lesson on that.
The whiskey's like mom. Bourbon, rye, Scotch, Irish whiskey, those are all her children, right? And so what defines different types of whiskey is the type of grain you use or where it's made. So bourbon's got to be majority corn. It's got to be made in America. It's got to be aged in freshly charred white American oak. Rye, mostly rye, can be made anywhere. Also got to be aged in white American oak. Irish whiskey, got to be made in Ireland. Scotch, got to be made in Scotland, oftentimes aged in used barrels. It's all about that mash bill, all about the grain. And then, there's some definitions, of like where it comes from, right? So like, Mexico has the trademark on tequila. You got to make tequila in Mexico.
So it's interesting. So I've been to Scotland, I've been to Ireland, I've been to the distilleries there. So but I never thought about this, and it's probably a duh and going to sound really stupid, but you can't make Scotch here.
No, we can't.
You can't make a Michigan Scotch, even if you ordered the stuff in from Scotland and made it here. You couldn't make a Michigan Scotch.
No, but what a lot of craft distillers right now are doing, which is a really big growing category, is American single malt whiskey, right? So most Scotch is single malt, right? So people are taking a single type of malted barley most often, and so they're distilling that. So we've actually...
It's a knockoff.
Well, it's a different way of doing it. I mean, there is an incredible diversity of malts that have really come out of the craft beer industry. So American single malts is like a really emerging kind of bleeding edge thing in the craft spirits industry. So, it's the American version of Scotch. It's single malt whiskey. It's not Scotch whiskey.
Ross keeps forgetting that he's mic'd up and on camera, and he keeps sending me little notes. I don't know why you keep doing that, but
I just wanted to know if you believed in sex before marriage. You said I'm sending you a little note. No, my question was,
moron.
What about, tell me about the phenomenon, if you will, of small batch.
Yeah.
I find that very interesting. I mean, you never heard of it. And now it seems like it is a sort of the marketing buzz. I see it not only in the whiskey business, but in a lot of other businesses. We make limited edition, small batch. Where did that start from?
It's a great question. And so I'll tell you how we approach it, right? Because, whether it's truly small batch or not, I don't think there's any standard rules of what is small or not. But for us, we we're not trying to be like all these big. We're not trying to be Woodford Reserve. We're not trying to be Jack Daniels. We're trying to be Detroit City Distillery. So part of that for us, we get excited about making experimental whiskeys. So, like last year, we made a single barrel of honey bourbon. So we had bees up on our roof with this organization called Bees in the D. We harvested the honey. We put the honey inside a used bourbon barrel. We took the honey out, then we put bourbon back in. And so we had this honey finished bourbon that had this really cool story, and it was just a single barrel. And, like you can't get it again. So, happiness is fleeting. Like you got to get it now.
Right.
And how many bottles come out of a barrel?
About 250 approximately.
Got it. Because the liquor stores that I go to or have been to, they push small batches. They say,
Yeah.
we're the only ones who are getting this. In fact, I think you brought me a Whistle Pig recently, and it said for this particular party store.
Yeah.
And
I gave out about 400 bottles of it. I mean, it was
a nice.
It was a big addition.
It was like a gimmick.
Yeah, well,
it seems gimmicky, but it seems is it legit when they try to sell me this? Is it legit?
It's absolutely legit. So more and more liquor stores, even some of the bigger chains, are selecting their own single barrel. So we've had Kroger come down and they've bought a barrel of bourbon and rye from us that they've picked out of a lineup of 10 to 12 different barrels.
Interesting.
So, it's a way for these proprietors who knew a lot about alcohol. They know what they like to drink. They know what their customers like to drink. They pick certain taste profiles that they think either they like or what is going to sell. So it's their way to kind of create something unique, in this day of like e-commerce where you can pretty much buy anything online. Being able to have that special like owner's touch, one of a kind, you can only get it from us, is I think really special.
Yeah, for
people
sure.
gravitate to that. You got to have a story
It's
behind
like
your
that
spirit.
KBS beer.
Can I ask
when
one
it
other
comes
question?
out.
So
Exactly.
this is not a loaded question. You should pardon the expression.
Okay.
But actually, then, there is a difference in liquor stores. When you say, I go there because these guys really know their stuff, there is such a thing as that.
Oh, absolutely.
There's good ones and bad ones. And when somebody says, I go there because they have a really good selection, there truly is a difference in...
Absolutely. I mean, my rule is drink what you like to drink, right? There's so many marketing gimmicks out there. You don't know what to believe and what not to believe this, day and age. But, to me, it's all about the experience, right? It's about, the artwork, how the bottle feels in your hand, where the grain came from. Ideally, you like to know who made it.
Right.
Right? I mean, if you're going to spend $50 a bottle on a bottle of bourbon, you like to know what the company stands for and where the stuff comes from, So, that's kind of like what we try to do. It's like the very Detroit way.
Otherwise, get 10 high and drink in volume.
Sure. I mean, I'll take some shots of Granddad. I've drank plenty of Jack Daniels back in the day in my country years. So, there's nothing wrong with that.
So the 12 to 14 barrels, and Kroger comes down. I mean, are all 14 basically tasting pretty much the exact same, or are they?
No, there's definitely
some variations.
Definitely some variation. I mean, when you're making younger whiskey too, it changes. In small amounts of time, it can change a lot. But this is like an imperfect process, right? You're taking grain and producing. It goes in the barrel at 120 proof, and it's liquid sitting in a wood barrel. There's definitely lots of variables there. We have a couple different places we get barrels from. We get some out of this big place in Kentucky, but then we get some from this really awesome spot, Crow's Nest Cooperage in Grand Rapids. So there's this guy, Barrel Joe. He makes barrels. He smells like a campfire 24/7. And so it's really good handcrafted barrels. The flavor out of those barrels is amazing.
Can you reuse the barrels?
You can if you want to make bourbon. Bourbon's
You can't.
one and done. You
One
cannot.
and done.
Yeah.
So what do you do with your leftovers?
So we actually kind of have
Make furniture.
So we've done that. Most of them go on loan to breweries because all these breweries. You mentioned KBS, right? So that's a Kentucky Bourbon Stout is what KBS stands for, right? So people are aging beer in bourbon barrels. So everybody wants to buy them, but we say, we're a small business. You're a small business. We know, money's at a premium. So we're going to loan you a barrel. You're going to make beer in it. You're going to give us the barrel back and some of the beer you made. So all the guys are happy. So we get all this good rare beer.
Trade.
A win-win.
Then
That's a win-win.
We might make some crazy finished, double-barreled whiskey or some gin or who knows
So
what.
you just can't make bourbon.
Just can't make
You can
bourbon.
make whiskey. You can make rye. You can make other concoctions.
Exactly.
So if I wanted to come down and pick a barrel, you could make Mike Morse bourbon or rye or whiskey.
100%. You absolutely could do that.
Can you do it
200
by
bottles.
tomorrow?
What did
You
you say?
could.
200 bottles to a barrel? Is that what you said?
About 240 is usually the average.
All right, we'll talk offline.
All right, sounds good.
I love that idea.
It's a lot of fun. It's great. Like, we've had people get a group of guys together and they all go in on it.
And it doesn't go bad. Like wine can go
It
bad.
never goes bad.
Wine can go bad.
Never goes bad.
Does it change with age?
Not once it gets out of the barrel.
Okay.
Yeah. Like years 4 onward, it just keeps rounding and smoothing out. So it becomes a little bit more cohesive and smoother as time goes on. But, you get most of the flavor out of the grain, most of the color out of the barrel, most of the flavor out of the barrel in the first, 2 years. So
you mentioned taste. Drink what you like, and,
Yeah.
I heard that, and that does make a lot of sense. But let's say one of the most popular bourbons, Woodford Reserve. You mentioned it.
Yeah.
How does your bourbon differ from a mass product? I mean, they're making millions of bottles a year. I don't know how many, hundreds of thousands of
Yeah.
bottles a year.
Yeah.
Right. How does yours differ from theirs? Like, and you can brag, and you can be, they're not going to be listening to this, I'm sure.
Sure. Well, so I actually compare Butcher's Cup Bourbon is like a younger version of their Double Oak, which has a little bit more smoke, a little bit, higher rye content to it, I believe. But I think it aligns a lot with the flavor profiles of this. But, like, here's another interesting thing, right? So, like, Woodford Reserve probably sells, tens of thousands times the amount of, bottles of whiskey that we do.
Sure.
But we have, like, twice the amount of Instagram followers than Woodford Reserve does. So, like, that's kind of the interesting thing in my, estimation. Like, you get all these new distilleries coming out. Like, people are fascinated by Detroit. They're fascinated by booze, and they're really fascinated by booze made in Detroit. So, we got people all over the world paying attention to this. We got people from Poland seeing if we can ship them Punchki vodka. We had somebody just reach out today from British Columbia, ask if we could ship, and we said we couldn't. They said, we'll see you on Saturday.
Oh, they're coming in?
It's crazy.
Canadians are coming?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Is there going to be a line at your store?
I anticipate there might be a line at 10
How many
a.m. I
barrels?
have no idea what's going to happen.
How many bottles of that did you make?
So we made about 2,000 bottles total of Punchki vodka. I think we're going to have about 1,000 or so to sell. So yeah.
1,000 to sell because the other 1,000 are committed and sent out.
There's some down in Chicago, so if you got any Chicago friends,
All
you
right.
can go buy it at Benny's. And
I was at the All-Star game. I was just there.
Nice.
But I didn't look for it. And you're in most bars and restaurants, or a lot of bars and
a lot
restaurants?
of bars and restaurants.
I didn't know that. I'm so glad that we're having this conversation because when I go out and I am having a drink, I do order a bourbon.
Yeah.
You have a story to tell now.
I have a story to tell, and I know who to support.
Yeah.
And quite frankly,
The boys
this
from
is,
Bath.
This is better to me than Woodford Reserve.
Thank you.
Or
This is
or
high
other.
praise.
I had a Basil Hayden last night.
Another great one. Another good high rye bourbon, too.
You know what? It is good.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like Basil Hayden. I like Blanton's.
Yeah.
I like this better.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's high praise. I'll
We're
take that
laughing
all
He's
day.
at
trying to get a
Blanton's
cheap
now.
barrel. He's
What?
trying to run you down on price on his barrel. Don't fall for this.
Thanks, Kevin. You ruined my negotiating. Anyway, Michael, anything else you
Very
want to add for our listeners and viewers?
No, thanks so much for having us. Come see us on Saturday.
I
We're
will.
going to be selling it Saturday until Punchki Day, the 25th, or until it runs out.
Are you going to have punchkis to serve with the booze?
Yeah, so we're actually having our friends, I'm probably not going to say this correct, Pietrik Pierogi. Erica is like the pierogi queen, so she's going to be doing pierogies, and then she also has made some like really like amazing like artisanal like punchki, like some stuff that's some untraditional
I'll
flavors.
see you there.
Yeah, for sure.
And then also fresh off the press, your first one to get it is Schrodix is doing a brunch with us on Sunday. So we're going to do a Punchki vodka brunch.
Sunday, 12 to 6 p.m.
Legendary kielbasa. We'll get some good sauerkraut. They make some amazing horseradish. And so, yeah, we're going to be drinking Bloody Marys and eating kielbasa.
Now,
Very
Bloody
nice.
Mary with the
Polish
Punchki
pancakes.
vodka? Probably not.
I don't think
Tomato
so.
juice and the
No.
sweet. I don't like that.
We made a couple cocktails. We made a Polish margarita.
Oh,
And we made a White Russian variation where we took out the Kahlua and added a raspberry liqueur named Chambord.
yeah. I've heard of Chambord.
It's
Pretty good. It
Dude,
tastes like a
that's
punchki.
a raspberry. I
Yeah.
mean, that's
Yeah.
a raspberry
Oh,
with
yeah.
a raspberry
Raspberry
topping.
bomb.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, listen,
alcohol on alcohol.
Michael,
what
thank-
could go wrong?
thank you for coming in.
My pleasure.
I wish you the best of luck with the Punchki vodka. I think it's going to be a huge success. Thank you for the bourbon. And I will be talking to you about that barrel.
All right. I look forward to it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.